Hey, First Presbyterian Church, this is Pastor John here. Today's worship is going to be a little bit different. I decided to change my plans for the lectionary that I had planned to kind of take us into today's worship. And instead, I'm going to do something a little different. As a matter of fact, I was going to do this outside, but it's a little too windy today. Kind of see I got a little wind blowing on my way in. And I'll be honest with you, this whole coronavirus and everything that's going on is a little bit of an odd situation for me. I don't really have a good playbook for this. And I know a lot of you probably have had your schedules interrupted and things are a little odd, a little wonky. And my girls, for example, don't have school the next 2 weeks. And so they're going to be hanging out with me a lot. So if you don't see me in the office, that's kind of what's going on. I just get the feeling that the reason I wanted to stop and kind of break what I had planned is because things had been simmering around the world for a while with this coronavirus, and all of a sudden it feels like the heat has just gotten turned up and we're right before the moment when the pot's about to boil. And it's in Montana, we used to talk about how one of our favorite pastimes was looking at your neighbor's weather, and it feels like you can see the clouds out on the distance, but you don't really know how big that storm is going to be and how much, damage it's going to cause. I get the sense that we're in that moment right now. And it's times when you're in the disease feels really like at pandemic levels, proportions that we get affected in kind of a unique way. And thinking about other times, at least in my memory of experiencing this, and it makes me think about a couple of years ago we had the Ebola crisis in West Africa. Years before that we had the bird flu and SARS in Asia, and then even back to the 80s when we had the HIV/AIDS epidemic that started spreading. We didn't know what it was or what to do with it. And what it kind of has been brought to my attention, I think, is that there's the disease, but then with it, there is a dis-ease. There's something extra. It's emotional that accompanies it, and there's this dis-ease that surrounds and it comes as a package with the disease, and it's like this low-grade fear and this anxiety and this panic. And if you don't believe me, go to the grocery store and try to get toilet paper, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. There is just a sense of vulnerability and dread that's really hard to name, because we live in a time in a world when we have done such a good job at managing the risks to our health and safety that we're just unfamiliar with being confronted in this way with our fragility and our vulnerability, and it can be kind of terrifying. And I think that's the dis-ease that surrounds our disease. And so I just want you to know, if you feel this way, if you're kind of like at a deep core emotional level, just know that you're not alone. And in a way, I think this is really normal, and we're all kind of in this together. And so what I want to do today is hopefully point out an invitation hidden within the dis-ease, within this kind of terrifying moment, that I think maybe God is calling us to something. God often uses really hurtful, really unpleasant and uncomfortable situations and works some good through them or in them, oftentimes in spite of them, right? That's the Christian message, that out of the very worst thing, God brought the very best thing. And so if it hasn't already, let me, the spoiler alert here, the coronavirus is going to disrupt your life. It is going to disrupt the rhythm of your life. And the fact that I'm recording this in person, rather than doing it in person in the sanctuary and sending it out to you through the website, is evidence that it is disrupting your life. And so I think there may be an invitation within it to slow down. There may be an invitation within the disruption of our life to be with one another in some new ways. We live in a culture that is really about doing more, being more, producing more, never stopping, never getting off the treadmill. It's like we're human doings rather than human beings. And so in response to this, I want to turn to the book of Leviticus, which I know you didn't see coming. And so the reason I want to do that is because within its foundational documents, the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, we're given this book called Leviticus that has kind of tucked within it, if you know to look for it. It can be a really challenging book, but breaks within the culture. It has kind of built in a rhythm of life where you stop, you take a couple of deep breaths, you allow something new to start. And it creates natural endings so that you can have the beginning of new things. And I wonder if maybe the coronavirus is allowing us to take a break and to be with one another in a different way, in a way which we normally wouldn't. And despite what you may think of when I say the word Leviticus, all the laws and the rules and the regulations, what I think lies behind it is that it's actually teaching us through the lens of Israel having come out of slavery in Egypt how to be a human being. And the reason I say that is because, remember, Israel has just come out of slavery, just having had the experience for a couple hundred years, 400 years, of being the object of Pharaoh's production. And Leviticus is saying, you're not going to live that kind of a life anymore. You're not going to be an object of Pharaoh's more. Do more. Produce more. So here is how we want you to act in order to not be an object of production, but to be a human being. And I bet that some of you who are watching this know what it feels like to be a cog in a big machine where your job is just to produce more widgets. Or you're part of an organization that's so big that it really doesn't matter how hard you work or what kind of difference you feel like you're making. You're just part of it. And it's going to, the machine, if you don't keep moving, it's just going to steamroll right over you. And that can feel like being a slave. And at its core, the gospel, the message of salvation, starting with Exodus, going all the way through, is liberation from slavery, from bondage. And so Leviticus is saying, God's saying, I want to teach you how to be human again, how to order the world in a different and a new and a healthier and a more whole way. And as human beings, we all need order and we all need structure in our lives. You think about children, right? Children need structure. They need boundaries. They need discipline. If they have too much freedom, it's actually chaos for them. If you've ever been to Disney World or Disneyland, you know, the trip afterwards, or here's an even better example. If you've brought your kids to Grandma and Grandpa's house, and I love Grandma and Grandpa, and I know there are lots of you out there, so please don't take this in any kind of a negative way, but all the rules tend to go out the window, right? And so then as parents, when the kids come back from Grandma and Grandpa's, you have to have some decompression time. It's like withdrawal, because there's so much, life is so much less structured according to the way that it used to be. Now, those who have been abused, in particular children who have been abused, really need some reordering in their lives. Monastic communities are all about reordering life in a certain way, creating structure and boundaries. People who have gone off the rails into addiction need, if they've decided to get clean and sober, they come to a program, they don't get to decide what time they eat and when they go to bed and when they go to their therapy. No, all that is decided for them because they need some order and some structure. So within Leviticus, there's a whole lot of rules and regulations, but there's a whole bunch, and you can look at Leviticus 23 in particular. There's a whole bunch of these festivals throughout the year. They're scattered throughout the year. There's 6 of them plus the Sabbath, which is not an annual festival. It happens every week. But I just want to lift up a couple of these and just kind of point them out because I think they help make the point of the ordering of life. And the way that Leviticus and the festivals are broken up is that there are two halves of the year. There's the spring and the fall. And the reason it's broken up into these two halves are based on the agricultural cycle. It was an agricultural economy and community, and most people worked the land. And so you have the spring and the fall. And then there were 3 festivals in the spring, 3 festivals in the fall. And they punctuated these 2 major times of year, which were the planting in the spring and the harvest in the fall. And these were 6 big opportunities, 7 if you count weekly Sabbath, to pause, to stop, to rest, to be, to remember, to reflect, to put things into perspective. How many times do we have throughout our week, months, and year? How much time do we take to pause, to stop, to reflect, to remember, to reorient ourselves? And just so you know, I'm not making this up. I went through and I kind of enumerated all of them. The spring festivals were the Passover and unleavened bread, which was to remind Israel of the Exodus experience. And then the next 2 was the festival of the first fruits, the first harvest, which I think was barley in that kind of region, in that area of the world. And then the Pentecost, which they call the Festival of Weeks, which we now know as Pentecost, was the first fruits of the wheat harvest. Then in the fall, there were another 3 festivals. One was trumpets, which later became Rosh Hashanah, the new year. All of these, by the way, take place in September, October. It's called the way that the Bible talks about it in the Hebrew scriptures and Torah is the 7th in the 7th month, right? And their months are aligned differently from what we know as the Gregorian calendar. But that's not an accident. It happens in the 7th month. 7, whenever you see 7, you're supposed to think Sabbath. You're supposed to think completion. You're supposed to think rest. You're supposed to think perfection. God made it all good. And one day we will all rest with God. And so all these happen in the 7th. So you have Rosh Hashanah, the trumpets, which later become Rosh Hashanah. And this is when the shofar, the big ram's horn, is blown to summon all of Israel to embark on a mission and remember God's faithfulness. Then there's Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, which is the day when Israel is purified, is made new again, given a new start, a new beginning, which would happen every year. And then the third was the Festival of Booths, which is when all of Israel would take a week off and they would go and live out in the wilderness in temporary dwellings to remember their time in the wilderness, their purification period. And so the unique thing I think about, and this isn't just my thought, this comes from numbers of Jewish scholars who have pointed this out, is that Judaism is different from most other religions in the sense that the first thing it makes holy and sacred is not a place. It is actually time. So if you go all the way back to Genesis 2, there's that little line, and on the 7th day, God blessed it and made it holy. That is the first thing that God makes holy. And there is a distinction that is made in the Jewish and then Christian mind between sacred or holy time and ordinary time, that which isn't sacred or holy. And not all Christian traditions do it, but as part of the Reformation tradition in which the Presbyterians find ourselves, we do celebrate a liturgical calendar, a liturgical year. It starts in Advent, which is a little different again from ours in that it starts in December and makes its way all the way around through Christmas and then Lent and Easter through ordinary time back to Advent for the next year. This comes from the Jewish tradition, by the way. There's a reason why we do that, because of this tradition of festivals. And the calendar, our liturgical calendar, keeps us immersed in the story of God's salvation, reminding us that it is God's leading. It's God who leads all things to a particular end. And we hear that story every single year. We're reminded of, through these punctuation marks, throughout the year of these festivals. And in the Christian world, we've kind of, much to our detriment, I would say, lost some of the Jewish festivals. But we have the Advent and Christmas and then Lent and Easter. We've kept on to those. We could do well to regain some of the Jewish festivals. But just as the week has a rhythm and rest to it, the year actually was given rhythm and rest, because it gets just too easy to get caught up in being a human doing, being a producer, thinking you're an object of somebody else's production. And the Jewish calendar is kind of odd to us. I mean, it works on a lunar calendar. We don't go by the moon, we go by the sun. The months don't line up with our months. But one of the really things about the Jewish calendar is that it only marks sacred time and holy time. It doesn't mention ordinary time at all. Those are just the pauses in between the important pieces. We mark our time by Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And then you get a little break for the weekend. We tune our schedule by the work we're supposed to do. And then if there's a little time left over, we'll live into that. We allow ordinary time to define us, not the sacred and the holy. And I think there's a lesson there for us about how we approach time and how we can allow sacred and holy time to reorient us. And there are, besides these festivals, there are other ways that God encourages us to live into sacred and holy time. Every week there's a Sabbath. On the seventh day, it's a day of rest. It's a day to kind of just put down the production machine of being in this world. God recognizes that we still have to do, but also we need to stop and remember that the world will continue to work without us. And that's the gift of Sabbath. And then there's a sabbatical. So Sabbath is every 7 days. And then there's every 7 years, the sabbatical year. And in the sabbatical year, that's the year when the land itself, the soil, gets a rest. And if the land gets a rest, that means everybody who works the land, including the animals, get a rest too. So the way that this is set up is even the soil is allowed to rest and recuperate and not burn out. And then so you've got Sabbath, sabbatical, and then there's a third level, a third tier that is what we call the year of Jubilee. It's the 7 times 7th year. So 7 times 7 is 49. In the 50th year is the year of Jubilee. This is when all of the debts are forgiven within Israel. This is when all of the slaves are allowed to go back. If you've bought land off of your neighbor or your cousin, the land goes back to the person it originally started and belonged with. Everything is reset. And Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah, after the exile, in Isaiah 61, he picks up on this idea, of Jubilee. He calls it the year of the Lord's favor. Isn't that interesting? When everything gets reset and renewed and restored, he calls it the year of the Lord's favor. And this is what Jesus picks up on in Luke 4. When he has his first sermon in Nazareth, he stands up in the synagogue, he opens up the scroll of Isaiah, and he reads to them, "I have been anointed to bring good news to the poor. Let the oppressed go free and proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And then he sits down and he says, "Today, what you have heard has been fulfilled in your hearing." What he's really saying is, now it's time for a permanent Jubilee, when everything will be restored and renewed, and everything will be allowed to rest. And interestingly, his hometown congregation, their response in verse 21, Luke 4:21, they are amazed at his gracious words. And then if you just read a couple of verses later in 29, their next response is they drove him out of town and tried to throw him off a cliff. Because sometimes that's how we respond when we are confronted with God's plan for how things should be when it doesn't line up with ours. And so I guess I just wanted to take this time in the midst of the craziness that it feels like the world is going through, as the pot is starting to boil, as we see the storm clouds out on the horizon, and we're getting nervous, and we're getting anxious, and we feel the vulnerability, the dread, the dis-ease that accompanies the disease, and encourage us to take sacred and holy times to heart, to allow them to break our rhythm. Use this as an invitation this breaking of the rhythm of your normal life, to stop, to rest, to reflect, to intentionally recenter yourself and ask yourself the question, to reflect on God's bigger purposes. Because sometimes you can get so focused on the score, you forget whether you're playing the right game at all. And so every now and then you need to stop and say, wait, what game is it that I'm playing here? Is this the game I really should be, that God calls me to be playing? And sacred time, holy time, times of rest, times that break our rhythm, allow us to do that. So let me offer you, in the midst of the disruption and the dis-ease within the disease, invite you to embrace a pause to your rhythm of life. Embrace it. It's going to happen. You can fight it, or you can embrace it. Embrace the invitation to reconnect with one another and to reconnect with what life is supposed to be about. That evaluating, am I too worried about the score that I've forgotten what game I'm playing? And embrace the invitation to live more and more into the sacred and the holy time, the year of the Lord's favor. Amen. And so with this this message that I'm going to put up on the website here, I'm also going to link to a couple of songs that I encourage you to listen to, spend a little time with. And these are going to be songs that are, they're circular kind of songs from a community in France called Taizé. And they're pretty easy. They're not all in English, but they're pretty easy to get your hands around, and allow them to be an anchor that holds you throughout the weeks to come, as the interruptions of life start kind of breaking in. Welcome and embrace those interruptions, and use this music as a way to tie you back down to saying, to embracing that time and making time sacred and holy. And you can sing them to yourself. They'll be in your head, trust me. They're circular songs, and so you hear them over and over, and they kind of stick with you. And so that's my invitation to you, is to use that as a mode of allowing yourself to be recentered. And grace and peace to you. And I hope that in just a couple weeks that we look back on this as something that has come and gone, and keep in prayer those who are sick, those who are affected by the coronavirus, and for God's healing to really enter into this world, and that we all can just pause during this time and not respond and react too strongly to the fear, because God called us to not be afraid. And so that's my message for you this day. Peace to you all.